Okay, I'm trying this again, so I wish you would just be patient with me. I'll wait for a few minutes for people to um, join up. Um, there we go. Okay, looks like I've got 41 viewers here, so I'm going to go ahead and I just need to inform my moderators. So give me 1 second here. Um, okay, yay. Okay, folks, look, this is a little bit difficult to do, so I'm gonna share my screen here and turn my. I'll tell you what. I'm just gonna leave the presentation like that, so you can just see it. You'll have to let me close my notes down. Oops. Okay. Sorry about that. So we're going to title this Unraveling. Appreciate your patience. This is I'm an old man and this is still pretty new to me. And part of what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to monitor the chat, look for questions and do my little presentation and that type of thing. So it can be a little bit difficult. So I'm going to call this one Unraveling. Again, just some of the these are some of the channels you can get us on, that type of thing. And we're still working on developing a podcast. You can pray for us. We're all volunteers, and it just takes a little bit of time for us to get all of these things done. We do have an app. Just look for Fellowship Bible Chapel on the Apple and Google stores, and it seems to be working okay. But if you have any problems, you can send us feedback. There's an email address and stuff that we monitor at fbchapel.com. You can click on email. I think there's a list there of people at FBC you can send us to, and we'll try to update this. And we have issues with sound and everything. So just let me give you a sort of a little brief statement on that. We have a live audience church. That's who we're responsible to. So that's sort of our first priority. Can people that are sitting there in the church hear and see everything? So I think that we try to do the best we can. And then I think all these people who stream and that type of thing, you need to pray for them, because it is technically difficult. It's not quite as easy as it looks, especially when you add in video and PowerPoint slides and that type of thing. So we're a little church. We have about 80 people there on a good Sunday, and it takes time. So just know that. So we talk about the convergence of events and all these different things, and this is just sort of a slide that I've made up to show all these things that I think that have happened in the past, that talked about that fulfill Bible prophecy, and that are going to happen, some of which are going to happen in the future. Some of them are historical. So we live at kind of a very, I think, unique time. There's really a lot going on. So I get the question from a lot of people, is this it? And I can't say for sure that this is it, but we have this, I don't like that. So I can't do that because I'll shut off my chat here in just a second. So anyway, so I think that So it's going to be a little bit crude tonight because I want to watch the chat a little bit more than I do, because I have like 4 screens here and the PowerPoint seems to eat up all of them that I want to look at something else on. So again, I apologize for the, I shouldn't, my wife says you shouldn't apologize all the time. So I'm sorry for apologizing. This is a great slide that I think that I found a while back. This this orchestration, this 3D orchestration, and I think of it as all these different pieces and parts. And you think of a guy like Beethoven, who was completely deaf and who was able to write these great orchestrations that everything fit together in great harmony and everything. And how did he visualize that and hear that? And I sort of think this is how Bible prophecy is. It's very much a very layered thing. So you're going to have prophecies, and particularly when you look at it from a Jewish perspective too, because prophecy is pattern. They did not think linearly and logically like we do, and sort of a Greco-Roman Hellenistic viewpoint. And so it's hard for us to do that. I'll give you an example. I have a friend, Charlie Garrett. I've spoken at his church, Superior Word, down in Sarasota, Florida, a few years ago. And Charlie's great. I'm sure we don't, pretty sure we don't agree on everything. But if you want to hear a really good example of a sermon that talks about typology and that type of thing, he did a sermon this past Sunday on Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 14. And I just think it was superb. I mean, he brought so many of the layers of everything that was going on. This is where they're getting ready to cross the Jordan. They set up the standing stones. And this is something that, this is how they, there's just so much typology in that passage. And so they set up these stones. And I believe, if I'm recalling the passage correctly, they took them and they put them at Gilgal. But when Jesus was baptized, Jesus went to the Jordan. And when he got to the Jordan, he said, he mentioned these stones. And I think they were the stones of Joshua that were there. So you sort of see this continuity. And then the book of Joshua is all this great typology about Jesus, and the book of Revelation and that sort of thing. So I would just, if you want to see just a good sermon that I saw today, I was watching it. I just think Charlie did a great job. And I really think that this typology thing about Judaism and the Jewish thought and pattern is prophecy and that type of thing, I just think that this is really sort of bringing some really great understanding to the prophetic scriptures. And I think that in itself is a fulfillment of prophecy, because it's, we talk about this verse in Daniel all the time, where it says that the wise will understand. And I think as we get closer to the end, more people are going to be understanding this, because we're going to be going back and forth through the book, and prophecies that I think that we didn't think had that much to do with anything are going to become more important and more clear. So this is an example that I've kind of made up. For example, with the horsemen, this is just one of the horsemen. And so this is a controversial topic that, I have friends who will be very passionate about it, that the seals are already open. And some will say, well, no, they opened back when John had the vision, when he was on the Isle of Patmos, and they've been opening ever since. And some say, no, it has to be within the 70th week. And some say, well, and I think people are wrestling with it because there's a lot of things that have to happen in this last period of history. So I sort of liken it to this. I think the seals open in a relatively short period of time, this last period of human history. But before they open, you're going to see these foreshadows. And initially it's going to be rather blurry. It's going to be kind of fuzzy. And I think that's sort of where we are, but we're trending towards this where we're getting closer to the actual seal opening. And so the foreshadows are going to get clearer and clearer, and then they'll be very sharp in understanding. And that's going to be true with regard to all the seals. And then, of course, you could do the same thing for the trumpets and for the bowls. But I think the bowls are at the end. But again, every time you say that, everybody wants to argue about it. Well, you're wrong. So, but we live at this very unique time in history. So let me just look at a few things, and then just take a quick look at a couple things going on in the Middle East. I sort of cleaned up my presentation after Sunday of the stuff I didn't clean up, and I have like 170 slides. But I don't want to sit here and go through all those tonight because I'm going to save some of those for Sunday. But there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on that's significant. For example, there's a lot going on with regard to the economy. This is J.P. Morgan Chase, CEO Jamie Dimon. This is from Market Watch, but he did give some he did a private call for the big clients of J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the largest banks in the world. And they were telling people what he thought that was going to happen. And essentially he said that we're going to have a hard recession. Now, he was a little bit coy in the way he said that, but he said that there was, if you really unpack what he said, there could be he says a 20 to 30% chance. Other people interpret it as a 40 to 60% chance of something worse than a hard recession. In other words, it could go into a depression. There's also a guy who used to be associated with Prudential. Actually had talked to him some and consulting with him on a securities case I was working on many, many years ago. Dr. Ed Rubini, and Dr. Ed's always sort of been known as Dr. Doom. And he came out and he just said in an interview yesterday, you can find it at Bloomberg.com. He just said, I think it's not going to be a recession. It's going to be a depression, and it's going to last for a very long time. So look, I'm an older guy. That's not good news that I want to hear. I think Rubini, you have to sort of look at his track record and that type of thing. He was the one who called the 2008, 2009 recession and the banking and mortgage crisis that we had back then. So I think he's a voice to be listened to, but there's a lot of things going on. Nothing's fitting together the right way. The economic people that I talk to, investment advisors that we have, they're kind of scratching their heads. They don't know where it's going to go. Some are optimistic, some are pessimistic, but certainly we're in a very difficult time. And when the world's in difficult times like this, then we're at a time where there could be wars, there could be famines, there could be things, and there could be things that sound very much like the book of Revelation. So, so let me just do a couple things, then I'll address a couple questions, and we'll go to the Middle East. So, for example, this is just a headline that I picked up from the Wall Street Journal front page this morning. Drought devastates cotton harvest in the United States. None of this stuff is good news. I mean, this is not the kind of thing that we want to see happening or coming. There's a drought. There's a drought all over the United States. Now, part of this is drought. There's a lot of cotton grown in Arizona. Now, people say, well, that's a desert, but they water the desert. But they have been having cutbacks on water, somewhere around 20 to 30% cutbacks so far. I think that's going to get even worse unless there's major rain. This is a picture on the right of the Rhone River in France, the longest river in France. And as you can see, the river's not really much of a river right now. And this is true with regard to a lot of different places in Europe. The Rhine River has been pretty much shut down to barge traffic. That has a huge impact. That has a lot of carry on things because barges are how they transport crops and coal and other goods and services because it's the cheapest way. But now they can't do that. So now, do they have the rail system and the trucking system to cover it over? And then you add in maybe there's a diesel shortage coming, and people don't want the diesel thing to. They're worried about the diesel thing, so that can they do the trucking? It's just there's just a cascade of events here. This is a convergence of events, and they're happening very quickly. This is an article from The Guardian in the UK. They've put in what they call a hose pipe ban. That means they can't water their lawns and that type of thing. But the other thing that is happening is the farmers have been cut back. Well, they won't institute the hose pipe ban sufficient to satisfy the farmers, and so the farmers aren't getting the water they need, and their crops aren't growing. And so now in the UK, so you add in all of these things. You have drought in the United States, the Southwest, Central Valley of California, the Colorado, Kansas is still in a major drought in the Southwest part of the United States. You had also a bad winter wheat crop in Texas, which is a very big component of the wheat crop in the United States. Of course, you have the war in Ukraine, and there are ships getting out, but so far I think there have been about 7 or 8 ships that have made it out. And I don't even know if they've made it to where they were headed yet because they have to be inspected in Turkey first. And the first ship was supposed to go to Lebanon, and of course Lebanon has no money, and they can't make payments on anything. So it's just a cascade of things. And so Lebanon has a power crisis. They have a food crisis. They're essentially run by Hezbollah as the governing entity there. So everything is just this cascading thing. I read an article the other day that 80% of the crop in Italy could be lost. And that's a major agricultural country. In certain regions, they will not have much production this year. So you add in the production. So I think where you're really going to see it is next year. And we may not see it as much here in the United States, but I think I mentioned Sunday I went to a Sam's Club the other day, and the meat department was essentially empty. That was kind of disconcerting. And I don't know now, but then I go to a Costco and it's fine. I go to other stores and everything looks fine. For a couple of weeks there, it was hard to find lettuce, particularly romaine lettuce. Now I'm finding romaine lettuce all over the place. And then the iceberg lettuce looked bad. Now, picking up these heads of lettuce that look like basketballs. I don't even know where they're growing these things. Biggest heads of lettuce we've ever seen in our life. So again, it's just this, everything is very disconcerting because you know things aren't working right on one end of the economy, but other places they seem to be okay. Been a lot of stories about baby formula. I don't have a picture of it. Somebody from Colorado sent me some pictures of baby formula in the store where she shops, and it's under lock and key. You know how they put those plastic things around electronics and that type of thing, or chicken wire around it. That's how formula is, and they're only limited to 5 items per day per customer. Well, how do they know if your customer's going to? Because everybody's got a store card now, and they know what you've been buying. It's just like I have store cards for certain stores like Kroger, and they send me ads because they know this is what I bought. Or if I go to a Meijer and I open my app, it says, hey, you bought this the last time. Did you know that it's on sale? So they're tracking all of this stuff, and they know. So this is by no means over. And a lot of this has absolutely nothing to do with the war between Russia and Ukraine. That war is, I may talk about that. I don't know if I'll talk about that today or Sunday, but there's a lot of things going on. Here's another thing. This is sort of a cultural thing. Partisan hostility grows, and essentially what this says is that it asked the red or questions asked Republican results, answers to questions, and the blue are Democrats here in the United States. And so what they're saying is, for example, do you think Republicans will be asked, do you think Democrats are closed-minded? And you can see from 2016 to 2022, that's gone from 52% to 69%. On the Democratic side, it's gone from 70% to 83%. So then you add in this thing going on with Trump and the subpoena or the search warrant. So, you know, I watch different shows and programs, and it's been kind of interesting. I watch MSNBC just for the entertainment factor, to watch people melt down. And so yesterday there was a primary in Wyoming. Liz Cheney, who's been a Congress woman from Wyoming since 2016. She was elected when Trump got elected. And she's, the co-chairman of this January 6th commission and the House that's meeting in Congress and having these people come in. They never ask them hard questions. They never show the whole video. A lot of things that haven't been released. She was defeated. I think she got 29% of the vote. Her father, former Vice President Dick Cheney, came out and just said Trump was a criminal, and it didn't work. Whatever message she was trying to convey, it didn't work. And now it's coming out that her husband works for a big law firm. They have about 3,000 lawyers. He's a partner there. And it turns out now her husband does not represent Hunter Biden, but his law firm does. And it's a law firm that's very much connected to the Democratic Party. And let me just tell you that the people in law firms like this that are partners, if they're at the right level, I'm thinking of somebody like Attorney General Barr, I have an idea what those guys make. And I can tell you that they make more in a year than most of us make in an entire career in the law. It's very, very lucrative. There's a lot of money to be made there. But so her husband works for this Democratic-oriented giant law firm, 3,000 or more lawyers. But I don't think he has anything to do with the Hunter Biden case. But her husband is connected to the Democratic Party. And she came out, she gave this very bizarre speech, concession speech, and she's citing the Declaration or the Gettysburg Address. It was very bizarre, very inappropriate. People think she's going to run for president against Trump just to at least take votes away from him. I just don't think she's going to get much traction with anyone because I think her conduct with the way this commission has been constructed is just absolutely horrible. So then on MSNBC this morning, I just remember some of the comments of Joe Scarborough. He says, "Oh, it's just such a shame that this wonderful, wonderful person that everybody in Washington loves, named Liz Cheney, got defeated by these crazy extremists." And here is the narrative again, that everybody who disagrees with them is an extremist. Then Joe Scarborough said, and it's a shame that, isn't it amazing, Mika, that's his wife, Mika Brzezinski, isn't it amazing, Mika, that the reaction to someone like Liz Cheney and the election of a moderate from Delaware like Joe Biden has caused this reaction. And so you just need to know that on the left, they lie about you. So everything they say that people on the right are doing is what they are doing. They say, well, they don't believe in democracy. They want to, well, Liz Cheney was defeated in a Democratic election with votes. So stop with this nonsense. This is another thing I've talked about a lot, that population, we're at a place where the population is going to decline. Now, I don't think that means that you don't need to worry about China, or you don't need to worry about Russia or Europe or anything like that. But understand that where the population decline is hitting in big countries, some of which are mentioned in Bible prophecy, that makes those countries more dangerous. So the most rapid decline in fertility rates in human history has been in Iran. Now, that means that the Iranian mullahs, they know this. They put it in their newspapers. And so I just think that makes them even more dangerous. So you can see how this thing is going to decline. This was kind of an interesting thing related to election, was that this was from, I'm trying to remember where I got this. I think it was from the Times, UK Times. Fears of fraud in Kenya poll as counting lasts for nearly a week. So what the article is saying is, well, if the counting in an election goes on and on and on for like a week, then there's a bigger chance for fraud. Well, that's what everybody's been saying. And people on the right, they want a fair election. They don't want a particular result. They want a fair election where rules are followed. And that's not what's happening. Now, this is on a cultural basis. This is an act that was passed in Massachusetts. And the House of Representatives voted, I forget what the positive number was, 17 opposed. I think 6 Democrats and 11 Republicans opposed this law. It then went to the Massachusetts Senate, and at the Massachusetts Senate, it was posted, or it was a unanimous decision. So it went to the governor and was signed a couple of weeks ago, and here's what it says: an act expanding protections for reproductive and gender affirming care. And this is what they said in their statute: access to reproductive health care services and gender affirming health care services. So in other words, abortion and transgender surgeries and that type of thing is a right secured by the constitutional laws of the Commonwealth. Interference with this right, whether or not under the color of law, is against the public policy of the Commonwealth. So that's what's coming. I want to go back and just look. I'll have a little bit more on this on Sunday. This wasn't from a report. I think it came from, there was this report that came out, Time for a Shared Vision. And associated with that report is this article that I found from September of 2020. The world is approaching a tipping point on climate change when protecting the future of civilization will require dramatic interventions. Avoiding this scenario will require a green economic transformation and thus a radical overhaul of corporate governance, finance, policy, and energy systems. So what we have seen is this through a couple of vehicles in finance and business. The DEI, and some people say it should really be called DIE, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And I have told you, I did a midweek update back in the early part of June about Saudi Arabia and ESG. And I mentioned Russia and ESG because Saudi Arabia and Russia have been pushing this ESG. Saudi Arabia, through its Financial Innovation Investment Institute, FII Institute, and they have these big conferences every year, and they've been pushing ESG. Now, that seems kind of strange. Think about it. The Saudis pushing environmental. Well, they're the biggest pumpers of oil in the world, and people are going there asking them to pump more oil. Social. I mean, do you think the Saudi society is really open yet? I mean, I've just read an article yesterday that they will have an all-time record number of executions in Saudi Arabia this year. Is that the kind of social we want? And then governance, like they're an open society and democratic, and they're not. So look at what this article says. Under a climate lockdown, governments would limit private vehicle use, ban consumption of red meat, and impose extreme energy saving measures while fossil fuel companies would have to stop drilling. To avoid such a scenario, we must overhaul our economic structures and do capitalism differently. And it just came out today that there was an article in the Wall Street Journal today that talked about Aramco. That's the Saudi oil company. It's a public company now. And in the last quarter, they made a profit of almost $50 billion. Now, that means they're making about $4 billion per week profit because of the mess that the world's in right now. And they're pushing ESG. But when they push ESG, they benefit from it because, the stupid people in the West, we shut everything down. We stop drilling and that type of thing. And the price of oil goes up. And that's why Russia pushes it through the green groups that they help fund. And the price of oil goes up and Russia makes a lot of money. So the Saudi Arabians, so they had all this money. So they're pouring billions of dollars of money into big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and they just made about a $500 million investment in BlackRock. And BlackRock has probably been the biggest investment fund that's pushed the ESG thing. And people say, well, they wouldn't push ESG because it hurts companies, it hurts Exxon. But it helps companies like Saudi Arabia and Aramco. So there's a synergy there that it's just people need to watch this. So here's another quote from this October or September 2020 article. No, that's the one. Addressing this triple crisis requires reorienting corporate governance, finance policy, and energy systems to a green economic transformation. To achieve this, 3 obstacles must be removed. Business that is shareholder driven instead of stakeholder driven. This is what the World Economic Forum has been saying. This is an article from Project Syndicate. Finance that is used in inadequate and inappropriate ways, and government that is based on outdated economic thinking and faulty assumptions. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and I'm going to go to some of these questions that I see coming in. And I think I'll talk a little bit about the Middle East before we're done, but let me look at this. So Tammy, do you think China will attack Taiwan or will they stand down? I think right now that China's going to do a show of force. They're going to effectively, in many respects, but not totally, blockade Taiwan. I just don't think they're going to go for it right now. I don't think they have the capacity. Look, China has a very big Navy, but their Navy is not the same as the United States Navy. So a United States Navy with active destroyers and aircraft carriers that aren't blown up by hypersonic systems can really effectively control shipping lanes. I don't think China's ships have that big of a range. They are very limited in the impact that they can have. So they have a lot of ships. They just can't go very far. And I don't think they have the amphibious assault landing crafts yet to invade Taiwan. I think this is what they'll want to do. I think for now, I think they'll just make a big show of force and that type of thing. And somebody I see in the comment makes a very good comment about ESG companies. The countries in the world that have the highest ESG scores are the countries that are having the biggest problems right now. Sri Lanka, other countries. The ESG means they're going to be in big trouble. United States ESG scores like 58. Sri Lanka was like 96. But where would you rather live right now? But so I think that this ESG thing is a very big deal. So go back, if you want to review it, go back to I think it was June 6th or so. It was a midweek update in the first week of June where I talked about that. I even heard Glenn Beck today talking about ESG and Saudi Arabia and that type of thing. So welcome to the party, Glenn. It is a problem, and it's clear that Saudi Arabia is doing this because it helps make them more money. From Ron, will Democrats cancel the November election? You know, I don't know. I am skeptical that the elections will be normal. I think that there will be restrictions put in place that will allow um, voting by mail and absentee balloting. So we'll do that. So next question. People say the seals are open, but how can that be when the first seal is Antichrist? Well, that's an interesting question, because I don't know that the first seal is the Antichrist. Um, that's I think it is, but there's a lot of people who disagree that it is. Certainly, what we see when I talk about the seals, I see the seals open, and then that seal gets progressively more intense over the entire period of time of this last period of human history. Second seal opens, and so they're operating at the same time, and they're increasing in intensity. It's almost like a crescendo in an orchestra piece. I think of the piece, I was actually thinking about this today, like the 1812 Overture. You know, the 1812 Overture, it's like you got this going on, and you got the violins going, and then you hear some brass and that type of thing. And it's kind of here and there and muted and everything. And then all of a sudden, bam, you got the cannons going off and everything going off. That's how I think this is going to. I don't want to use it. The 1812 Overture is prophetic, but I think it's a picture of how this works. You got this nice little orchestra piece, and all of a sudden you got this really dramatic, loud thing, cannons booming, fireworks going off, and all that type of thing. I think that's how it's going to be. So somebody said to give you an update on my wife. So we both had COVID twice, maybe three times. It happens. We went to Vancouver in the latter part of 2019. I spoke at a conference up there, and we came home, and at our hotel in Vancouver, which was in the Chinese section of Vancouver and the Richmond section, and they have like whole strip centers where all the shopping center signs are in Chinese. There's not even any English around. So it's a very heavily Chinese area. And as we're going to our hotel there, as I'm driving up, here comes two big tour buses, and all these Chinese people start getting off. So I ran in to get ahead of them in line, and they were there. The 4 days we were there, every morning we go down to breakfast. There were Chinese people all over the breakfast room and that type of thing. Well, about 4 weeks after we came home, so we're probably outside of the incubation period for COVID or anything like that. But in early December so this would have been 2019. Yeah, early December of 2019, we got really sick. I mean, I had flu like I've never had flu in my life, and fatigue and that sort of thing. So then roughly a year later, December 2020, we got COVID again. And, we were kind of sick. I had trouble with my voice and that type of thing, but we lost taste and smell. And my taste and smell was gone for about 10 weeks. And Pam's really was gone and messed up for about 8 months. Then unfortunately we got the Omicron thing in this last December around Christmas, and her taste and smell went away, and it's still out. I mean, so pray for her. It's a real challenge. I did mention Sunday we hadn't found any good sweet corn. Okay, so I don't know how long I was muted. um, for some reason, this StreamYard software that I use, it seems like the muting just happens. Can you hear me now? Oh, from the sweet corn comment on. So Pam ate some sweet corn. She had about 3 years. Everything looked good. And I hope, am I back on? Somebody say, oh, sound is back. Okay. So, so just pray for Pam because it's very challenging because you don't feel like eating. Nothing tastes good. I might have something and it tastes fantastic. And it's sort of like, are you going? You're making me sick by eating that. So please eat something else or go someplace. It just interrupts a major portion of your life. I mean, eating is a very most humans like to eat, a couple times a day at least. And eating can be a very pleasurable thing. And when it's not, it's very, very bad news. So maybe somebody didn't want me to talk about sweet corn. But Pam loved the sweet corn. She had a few years. She hadn't eaten anything like that. We'd had sweet corn a couple times, and actually it wasn't very good from right around here in our immediate area. But, you go a few miles north or south of that band, and everything is great and fine. So there's a farm over by Urbana, Ohio, around Urbana, Mechanicsburg, Ohio. And this guy farms like, it's all sweet corn, it's all irrigated. And he farms it's like 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 acres. And they sell sweet corn like all the way to Chicago, St. Louis. I mean, this farm is enormous. And when you drive through, it's very interesting, the drive on Route 4 from Springfield to Mechanicsburg and then up towards Marysville or Plain City. You go through this valley, and it's just this vast amount of corn as you drive through this river valley. And it's this great picture of what God does for us, because they take these little seeds and they plant them and they get all this corn. They plant a little seed and they get all these big corn stalks. It's just this tremendous picture of abundance that God blesses us with. Let me see. So let me just make a comment about the picture behind me in my video tonight. That's a picture of Hebron in Israel. I've been there. It is the most, probably, Israel's going through a lot of problems right now, a lot of tension. I mean, they're doing okay, but there's a lot of people that don't want them to do okay. And Mahmoud Abbas came out yesterday in response to questions at a press conference and essentially said, hey, this is, we've got this, he denied the Holocaust. And I mean, and so this is the person that Israel is supposed to make peace with. And so today he was coming back and he had another press conference and he was issuing statements about why he didn't, people misinterpreted what he said. And there was no interpretation of what he said. It was pretty clear that he was telling what he really thought. And so here he is, he's 86. And so everybody says, hey, you got to make peace with these guys. You got to make peace with these guys. And it's a problem. So listen, I want to remind you at this time that there is this thing floating around right now called a peace plan that was proposed by Saudi Arabia. And this was this article back in June of this year, or July, early July. And interestingly enough, like the next day, there's an article about the same subject in the Wall Street Journal. Big article. So this guy comes from the Saudi prince. He's a confidant of the Saudi prince. And he's coming out and proposing this thing called the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And then the Wall Street Journal article comes out and says, a Jordanian future for the West Bank. And then I'm reading articles in different places. There's a guy named David Singer who writes for Arut Shiva. And he's talking about the fact that, this is a good thing. This would be a good thing. This would solve the peace problem. This would make everything okay. And as I said Sunday, I don't think it is. But then at the same time as in July, then you have Mohammed bin Salman going to meet with Erdogan. And then in a very interesting thing, which never happens, Erdogan went to the airport and said goodbye to his buddy, Mohammed bin Salman. Today, it was announced that Israel and Turkey are normalizing relations. They're going to exchange ambassadors again. I don't think this is going to last. This is all temporary. This is all for show. Erdogan has an election coming up, so he's trying to build that. So here's just some of these articles from David Singer in Arut Shiva, and I'm a Zionist. I support Israel, but this would be a great thing. And why is nobody talking about this? So you have you have Mohammed bin Salman, and he's making all of these trips back in July. He goes to Egypt, he goes to Jordan, he goes to Turkey, and he's meeting with all of these leaders at the same time that people in the Arab press are pushing this Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine idea. And essentially what that idea would be, and I just think this is very significant. So I'll make my case for it, and you can reject it if you want. I'm going to talk about it a lot until it's completely blown away, because there's a push to get Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords and to normalize things there. And so this wasn't a plan that came out back in 1970, around 1970, under Yitzhak Rabin, called the Elan Plan. And what the Elan Plan says is that we're going to create this Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. So you see Jordan on the right. The area along the Jordan Valley would be retained by Israel. And then there would be roads that would connect which you would call the proposed northern West Bank Palestinian state, with the southern, which is where Hebron is, and then a road connecting to Gaza. And then there would be a connection over to Jordan across the Allenby Bridge. So as I was looking at this, I was analyzing it. This is the Trump plan. And this is the Trump plan. This is what Jared Kushner proposed. And I'll talk more about this Sunday. There's controversy going on right now because Jared Kushner's saying something, and Ron Dermer, who was the ambassador to the United States, says, no, Jared, you're getting it wrong. And even Benjamin Netanyahu, who's coming out and said, I don't know what Kushner's talking about, because that's not the way everything went down. So Kushner's got a book out. But who is Kushner's good buddy? It is Mohammed bin Salman. Who has Kushner gone to with his investment fund, and also working with his thing called the Arab Accords Peace Institute, and his good buddy, Mohammed bin Salman, who will become king of Saudi Arabia. And somebody says, he becomes king of Saudi Arabia and he lives as long as his father. He could be king for 50 or 60 years. So now this assumes that the Lord doesn't return in that time, because I just think this is a very significant thing. So you have Kushner with his peace, you got Mohammed bin Salman with his peace, you have Turkey normalizing relations with Israel, but the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan plan is an old plan. And by the way, the area with the dots, that's where about 70% of the Israeli population lives, and about 80% of the industrial bases in that area. They're very high tech oriented and production and that type of thing. So that's all oriented in this coastal plain area between the West Bank and the Mediterranean. But so the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine plan is the Trump plan that came out in 2020 and actually came out the day that everything went to smithereens on the COVID thing in the United States. And I don't care what anybody says, this would have divided the land. You can see it. And if the Palestinians had accepted it, whether they were forced to or not, it would have divided Israel. And so there's a look at this. This is the plan proposed back at 50 years ago. And here's the Trump plan. Same thing. The only thing that the Trump plan didn't do was explicitly say that things are going to be controlled through Jordan. And this is significant because the way that Israel is configured, here you can see the Jordan Valley, and there's like this high wall that you have on both sides of the Jordan Valley. It's roughly 4,000 feet in elevation change from the bottom of the valley to the top of these mountains. And it's on both sides. The other thing, though, is this problem is that when you get up here where you see Jerusalem sort of in the left center of that map, and you have the Shephelah, that is that water, where the rain falls is there on the Mediterranean side of that mountain range. And that's the watershed. And that's what they propose under this plan to give to the Palestinians, the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine. Hashemite, that's the family that runs Jordan. King Abdullah II is part of the Hashemite tribe. They used to run Mecca and Medina, but when the Saudis took over Mecca and Medina, the Brits and other people thought, well, we need to do something for the sheriff of Mecca. So we're going to create this new country called Transjordan. And so the Hashemites were actually given control. They were the king of Jordan, and another branch of the family was the king of Iraq. And we know how all that ended up. The other interesting thing in all of this is, so here's a picture of what the Dead Sea area looks like. So you can see there's like this massive wall along. Here's another graphic that I use to show this wall. But what's interesting is today there was another development in this. So we have Turkey and Israel normalizing relations, exchanging ambassadors, which I think is temporary. But you have Jared Kushner doing his thing, and you have Jared Kushner's book coming out next week about what he did with regard to the Middle East. And he's good buddies with Mohammed bin Salman. And Mohammed bin Salman's given a couple $2 billion investment into Kushner's fund. And in Kushner's description of what he's going to do with this Arab Accords Peace Institute, he talks about setting up this investment fund. And he's doing it. At the same time that's going on, we're very close to having the opening of the Abraham Family House in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. You have sort of parallel things going on. You have these attacks on Trump through the legal system here, and you have these attacks on Benjamin Netanyahu through the legal system in Israel. Caroline Glick this week on her Mideast podcast, I always recommend that you listen to it. She has on a lawyer. We all love lawyers around here. And he talked about what's going on with Netanyahu and the charges against him. And it's absolute nonsense. But what they're doing in Israel is similar to what they're doing here. They want to criminalize speech. They want to criminalize being the political opposition. And there's this parallel. And now we have this Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine proposal. And is this going to be something that people adopt and they go for? I don't know. I'm just saying I think it's something that needs to be watched in light of everything else that's going on. And then this little snippet of news that came out today that the Crown Prince of Jordan, remember they had this dispute in the Jordanian family last year where the guy who used to be Crown Prince was jailed for a while and sort of he's had his activities curtailed. He was the Crown Prince. He was not the son of Abdullah II. He was the son of, I believe, Queen Noor, who was the fourth wife of King Abdullah I. So there's some tension there in the family. And in any event, Abdullah got his son to be named crown prince. And there was a crown prince that Abdullah the first had, and he was going to take power. And then 3 weeks before Abdullah the first died, he rescinded all of that and made Abdullah the second his heir, who would become the king of Jordan. And so now we come forward. Now there's this crown prince, the son of Abdullah the second. And today it was announced that he's engaged to a princess of one of the Saudi families, part of the Saudi royal family. So they all intermarry there. And so in a tribal culture, this is very important. So now you have the Hashemite kingdom of Palestine proposal from the Saudis, not being talked about a lot, but it's out there. Now you have the crown prince of Jordan marrying someone from the royal family of Saudi Arabia. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. And by the way, a half-sister of King Abdullah II, she was married to the guy who's not in charge of the United Arab Emirates, but in charge of the Dubai part of the United Arab Emirates, where they're building all those big buildings and islands and places in the ocean. Now they've gotten divorced. It was a pretty messy divorce. She was his sixth wife, and as I've always said, you can handle five, but that sixth wife is always going to get you. And she got about somewhere between a 600 to 800 million divorce settlement. She lives in London. So you just understand the politics of the tribal cultures there, and I think you have some very interesting things going on. I'm not saying that this is the thing that's going to be the thing that ticks off, some of this end time stuff. What I'm just saying is it's very interesting, the timing as to when it comes up. And it's, I think it's something to be looked at. So, let's see. I'm going to look at the, let me explain something too. Is sometimes stuff in chat, there are YouTube bots that kind of monitor chat, and they'll just go and they'll just go and do things, and they sort of shut down comments at times. So so let me see. Well, anyway, so it seems like everybody's just sharing good news with everybody else. So appreciate your continued prayers for my wife. I'll hang on here for just another minute or so to fill up a little time, and then I'll probably terminate this. So Sunday we'll talk more about this proposal about the Hashemite kingdom of Palestine. I do think it is very significant. You also have all these things coming with regard to the Abraham Accords, the opening of the Abraham family house. You have this continued war between Russia and Ukraine. And how does that play into this end time thing? You have continued attacks by Israel and Syria, even though they're getting pretty nasty comments from Russia. And Russia says, don't do that. You have to stop that. And Israel continues to go ahead now. Are they going ahead because they are allowed to by Russia, or Russia just doesn't have the time or ability to shut them down? I don't know. You also have a lot of stuff going on with regard to, I know we talk about it a lot, the Lebanese, the gas fields and the dispute between the maritime border dispute between Israel and Lebanon, and Hezbollah fitting of how that fits in. So look, this is all sort of churning right now. It's just a very interesting time. And then on the other side, you have all this stuff going on with the Pope. You have this transgender LGBTQ agenda. You have political chaos everywhere, governments failing, new prime ministers, new presidents, new government in Australia. You have all the things with regard to the Charlie Vector thing. It's just, again, as I've said for many years, this is this crazy convergence of events that we live in right now, which is really good. So Ron asked a question. I'm trying. So somebody says, good question, Tammy. Now I got to find what the question from Tammy is. Do you think the next pope will be a female? No, I don't think the next pope will be a female. I don't think the Catholic Church has gone that far. And understand there's also this Jesuit part with the Black Pope that I think controls a lot of what's going on. I'm not sure how much Francis controls, but it's pretty clear that they're all a bunch of Marxists that are controlling this thing. They have their own sex scandal, sex abuse scandal that's going on that they've been trying to cover up and deal with for years. This has been going on for a long time. I went to Boston back in 2002. And I remember we had a film crew at the class I was teaching because we were talking about the creation controversy. So this BBC film crew, you could probably still find it on the BBC website. And I was interviewed, and some people in the class were interviewed because a lady at our church was sort of heading up this creation controversy in the schools. And she had been involved with it when she lived out in Kansas. So she was talking about it in our class that day. And so this BBC crew shows up. And then I go to the airport to fly to Boston that afternoon. And there's the BBC crew in front of me in line. And they're sort of looking at me like, are you stalking us? And I'm like, no, I'm on my way to Boston. I said, you guys going to Boston too? Yeah, we're going because we're covering the deposition of the cardinal in Boston in the Boston sex abuse cases. So that was 20 years ago. And this thing is still going on. So I don't think the next pope will be a female. But will it be somebody who thinks they're a female? Now that's a whole different question. And I'm not going to put anything beyond anything right now happening. There's just too much going on. So Ron asked the question. I think I will end with this that I saw. Is there going to be a invasion of Israel soon? So that's a good question, Ron. I do not think that the Ezekiel 38-39 thing is going to happen soon. I don't think it's imminent. I think we see alliances coming together, but that's where this logistics part of what I talk about. It talks about a great company and a mighty army. But then what does that mean in today's world? Is it a lot of drones and mechanized invasion? Is it a large number of people? If it's a large number of people, they don't have the large people armies to be there. And supply chains are a big problem. We can see Russia had trouble invading Ukraine next door. So if Russia's part of this, they've got a very long supply chain that they have to get in place to invade Israel. I think what's more likely is that some kind of war will erupt between Israel, Syria, Hezbollah, and maybe a Gaza component thrown in. I think that's what Israel's preparing for. Certainly, Iran going nuclear will be a big change and everything. So that's I think in terms of an Israel invasion, it's probably going to be, I think it'll be bloody, intense, but I think Israel will be successful and prevail. But I don't think it will be Ezekiel 38 and 39. That's later into this 70th week period. I think maybe even towards the end. Although it could be, 38 might be sort of a first wave, 39 a second wave. That's also possible. So, anyway, so I think I'm going to end it, and appreciate you listening. I'll talk Sunday again. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about the transgender issue. This is coming into the local schools here around us. I talk to teachers, and they just say, you would not believe what's going on in our local school system, all these woke people coming in, and it's just absolutely, it's very troubling. And then we have the election thing. We have what's going on with Trump. And I think, listen, folks, this Trump thing is not just about Trump. This is about people who oppose the regime, or people that want to vote out the regime. I don't see a shooting civil war or anything, but I just think that it's going to be a very difficult fall with the election. I don't know how the election will go. I think they're going to, if it looks like they're not going to win, they're going to try to do something to interfere with it, or expand who can vote, or make security regarding the election very hard to come by. And so, for example, let me finish with this. So you have Arizona, you have the current secretary. So there were problems in Arizona last year. Now, whether anybody proved it or not, there were issues in the way I think the election was conducted in Arizona. Now, whether it would have changed the result or not, that's not necessarily the issue. But the Secretary of State, who's in charge of the election, is now running for governor against Kari Lake. And so she's going to be the one in charge of watching over the election that will determine whether she's governor or not. So it's just, everything is a mess everywhere that I look. It's very troubling. So stay in the Word, and we'll talk to you Sunday. Thank you so much for listening.